Hello from Estonia and welcome to the Startup in Estonia podcast, produced by Startup Estonia, hosted this season by me, Adam Rang. So each episode in this third season is going to focus on a different aspect of building a successful startup with a guest who has some very valuable advice to share around that topic based on their own experience of what they got right and also, just as importantly, what they got wrong. And I'm really excited about the guest who has joined us today, as well as the topic, which is how to pivot your business. So this is something that a lot of startups go through, especially now during the pandemic, when so many of the factors that founders have built their companies on have shifted so dramatically and unexpectedly. And our guest today has recently pivoted her own business. And it's a really fascinating business too, which we're going to learn more about. Karoli Hindriks was Estonia's youngest inventor with a patented product at the age of 16. She was the CEO of MTV Estonia at the age of just 23, really. And she's the founder.
That was fun.
And she's the founder and CEO of Jobbatical, a great startup based here in Estonia that has gone through its own pivot. So we're going to learn more about that. Welcome to the show, Karoli.
Happy to be here.
And you're regularly traveling the world, but I guess at the moment with the pandemic, you're mostly in Estonia a lot more.
Yeah, I've been much more steady here in Estonia. I was laughing that I finally got my One World Platinum and then the travel stopped.
Yeah.
So that was a bummer. But we will definitely start moving again. But it's happy to be here because we have the story with you, right? Because you actually came to Estonia through Jobbatical.
Yeah, I have to confess an interest here actually to the listeners. So yeah, I got my first job in Estonia through Jobbatical. The person who hired me got their job in Estonia through Jobbatical. and even after I joined, we continued to use Jobbatical. So we continued to hire people through the platform. And those people are still here in Estonia today. And they're still my very good friends. So I have to say a personal thanks. And it's good to be here.
It's an honor to be in your show now.
And so you're actually just around the corner. You have a very international team. How many employees do you have?
Do we have now? Right now, I think it's 34 people.
Oh, wow.
So we have our headquarters is in Estonia. But yes, we have a lot of people who have flown here from different countries, from India, Costa Rica, etc., help to build my vision. So it's so we have people from 10 different nationalities, but we also have offices in Berlin and Madrid.
Okay, Karoli, how do you convince people to come live in Estonia?
How do I convince people?
Is it the weather?
Definitely not the weather. But I think, talking about the kind of the workforce today, I think there's a combination of, Estonia and the digital brand, the user experience being so good. That's what I always emphasize to people. Also, I believe what e-residency has helped Estonia to create is the real digital tiger, the innovator among other countries, as well as the fact that when you have an engaging vision and mission, then people want to join you. So, but we are also very remote friendly. So we have people, there's foreigners in Estonian office, but there are also Estonians abroad and there are foreigners abroad. So we are all over the place.
Yeah. And some of the people listening might actually be considering moving to Estonia to start up their company. What's the biggest cultural shock your international employees go through when they arrive here?
Maybe let's start from the good, though.
Yeah.
I think the biggest culture shock, I remember when my former colleague, an American who moved here with his family from Florida, he said that Estonia has forever spoiled him just because everything is so simple.
Yeah.
From just being a citizen here, how the kindergartens work or how the taxes work, everything is seamless. And I think as an entrepreneur, you mentioned that I travel a lot, but still our headquarters is here. One of the big reasons for that is that here I don't have to think and waste time about being a citizen.
Yeah.
So I can just focus on building my business and I can focus on my family, right? So I think this is a positive culture shock, is that a country can actually function as easily and and have as little bureaucracy as Estonia has. I think in terms of, so it depends always where you are coming from.
Yeah.
I think what Estonia still has room in terms of learning is really embracing diversity. So looking at the short history of the country, short history meaning that since we became independent after the Soviet occupation, right? So Estonia was 50 years behind the Iron Curtain. Then you didn't see any diversity, right? And then we have had this short window. So I think bringing more diversity and seeing more of diversity around the cities of Estonia, that's something that we still have room to develop. And I think Jobbatical is contributing into it very effectively.
Yeah.
Because,
for a startup, what is the value of having a more diverse team?
What is the value? Actually, Jobbatical first hire was from Argentina. So it's funny because we started really to hire internationally from day one. And honestly, if I compare to my previous, because I've been an entrepreneur and leading teams, building teams for a long time, I think the one big thing, first of all, today, when we hire, we don't think about where the person is from. We're just looking for a best person. And when you have that mindset, you can really have a much wider choice. Because, I mean, Estonia is 1 million people country. The likelihood that exactly the right person is here for each and every role is very unlikely, right?
Yeah.
The second thing is for me, what building or this diverse organization has taught is that my team members are asking me questions that I didn't maybe even know that are questions. Like they are looking things from a very different angle. And I think I have had a lot of debates around culture fit versus culture add, and I'm a very big advocate for culture add. And culture fit in many ways, I would say, is that you are hiring people who are like you. And you're very comfortable with people who are like you. And you are nodding to each other around the table. Everybody agrees. You tap each other's shoulder and go to a pub. But then who is challenging your ideas? It's the challenge that actually takes you further. And what my team has helped me a lot is to ask those questions that I didn't even figure that were questions, which have opened avenues for us. So I think in many ways, organization is like when you think about your life, if you would have, you are born in UK and then you travel to, let's say, France, and that's the only country you keep on traveling, you have much narrower look on life than if you would be traveling to different countries of the world and explore and constantly learning. So I think the same way with the diverse organization is that if you hire people like you kind of stand still. Whereas when you hire people who bring something, a culture had to your team, you keep on evolving and growing.
And this is one reason kind of migrants tend to be very entrepreneurial, is that they bring new experiences with them, but then they see things locally where they can add more value.
There's even scientific proof that that traveling makes you more creative. But if you think about, I think it was a good aspect that you brought in. It was the entrepreneurial. I think if you think about person leaving their own country and to live in a new country, you need to have a little bit of entrepreneurship in you in order to make that step. Yeah. So the people who actually go are ready to really step beyond their comfort zone like that, have this entrepreneurial mindset, which I think are the best people to hire.
And so you founded Jobbatical 6 years ago. What was your original vision for the company?
Yes, so I sat down with the idea in 2014. Actually, where I had, so I would tell a little bit of the story, why I founded Jobbatical and where the idea came from. So before that, I was lucky after I left television business. So I decided to leave television. I had been in television, first MTV and then leading the launch for Fox and National Geographic channels across Baltics. So I was there for like 7 years and decided that I want to leave television industry. Didn't believe in that linear television anymore, and I decided to take some time off and figure out what's my next big thing. And I was lucky to get into a think tank. I don't know if you know, but Singularity University.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So. So I was lucky to be selected there. So I spent a summer in Mountain View living in Nazaim's research center, which is basically next to Google campus. So as I'm a runner, I love running. So in the mornings I ran past by Google in order to get to the seaside. And that kind of inspiring, you have all those big companies that are changing the world there. I started to ask the question, why are those companies that change industries coming from this region? What is special about this place? And I realized that it's not about people who are born there, but it's people who move there. So I started to ask, coming from a tiny country like Estonia, what would we need to do in order to attract highly skilled people instead of moving to Silicon Valley to discover far-flung cities like Tallinn or go to Helsinki, Slovenia, or Malaysia, for example. So my initial thesis was that in order to do that, we have to collect the highly skilled people into a community, basically borderless highly skilled people, so who are ready to move, and then match them to the businesses, inspiring companies in those far-flung cities. So that's what we started to do. That's how you got here.
Yeah.
So we were initially a marketplace. We moved people from 54 countries to, I think, 37 countries. And while doing it, what started to happen is that we started to support the relocation. Because, you are hired, but then you need to get the immigration and relocation done. So you actually need to get to that place.
Yeah.
So initially we started to do it as a supportive service, like step by step, testing it out, how we can help the whole relocation process. And what started to happen from there was that basically our clients started to come to us and ask, could you relocate also other people, not only the Jobbatical folks?
Yeah.
And some of the companies said that, we can manage the hiring part. Could you just do the relocation? So suddenly we had two businesses. One was the thing that we started off doing. And the other was basically something that just evolved and we were not investing in it. We did until last July, when we turned around the company in 2019, we had not invested even €1 in marketing for that, but it was growing basically 20% month on month. So we had the situation that there is one part of our business where the conversion is pretty low, but it's eating a lot of capital. The other that doesn't have any tech component, but is just flying. And so basically last year with my management team, we decided that we will turn around the company. And instead of doing two things, because as a startup, you need to focus and you need to have a product market fit. Yeah. So we clearly had a product market fit, and we actually clearly didn't have a product market fit. So we basically said goodbye to almost 500,000 users. That was a big thing.
Really?
Yeah, people were really sad. But you need to have focus and product market fit, and that was the best decision, of Jobbatical's history.
Wow! And so, what kind of challenges do companies face when they're trying to bring in people from abroad? Then,
I mean, so first of all, what we do is we are making immigration easy for companies who are hiring from abroad, right? So basically how the process works is that there's a company, let's say TransferWise, who's relocating people, let's say, to their Tallinn office. We take over from the moment that the person accepts an offer. We do everything. Basically, TransferWise just has to greet that person at one point in their office. So what is complicated? First of all, the whole immigration, and that's what we learned when we started to initially, like I said, in July, we didn't have any tech around our relocation business. We just had a business that was growing. We started to investigate, is there any software that is actually where you could manage the immigration relocation? Is there something that our team internally could use to manage our client relocation? And we learned that there isn't really. And the whole system is so outdated. So you have manually filling government forms, which in Germany only takes 7 hours, in Estonia 3 hours. So so we have a lot of outdated. There is no. Basically, the whole management of relocation was happening in spreadsheets, which means it's a messy process. So if a company is hiring foreigners, I think the funniest story of one of our clients in Germany told is that an example, they have the whole team of recruiters, global mobility, and they are hiring every month approximately 10, 15 people, right? And and it's such a messy process. You have a lot of emails. You have no visibility. What is the status of one or the other relocation? And they had a story where they had hired somebody from Pakistan who was supposed to start on Monday, and everything was such a mess. So many people involved, no visibility was going on, that on Monday when the person was supposed to start, they discovered the person is still in Pakistan.
Yeah.
So what we created was basically, first of all, a software that enables the immigration agent to seamlessly manage. So it's like a CRM for immigration agents. And that CRM is then connected to the interface of the company, who is, you just add, those are the people who are going to relocate, and then track. You see exactly, okay, this is visa stage, this person is arriving in 5 days. So you can constantly track what's the status of each and every employee. And then the third party, which is actually the most anxious counterpart, it's the talent.
Yeah.
Remember, when you were relocating, you have so many fears, you have so many questions, you have no idea what's going on. So we also gave an interface to the talent. So the talent will be onboarded. So let's say, use a TransferWise example, the talent will be onboarded to TransferWise platform, which feels like it's onboarding platform for to TransferWise. So it's fully white labeled. And on that platform, they get an overview, everything that's going to happen, that those are the steps to get to Tallinn, or those are the steps to get to Barcelona, Berlin, whatever the city and country is. And they know exactly what they have to do. They upload their materials. Instead of somebody filling forms, we just grab the information, put directly to the form. So instead of 7 hours, it takes 3 seconds. So basically, we gave everybody transparency about the whole process, plus we speed up the whole process.
Which countries do you offer this in? Because I guess you've got to figure out the migration rules for one country at a time, do you, before moving on?
But this is actually much simpler. So it takes us, altogether, we can launch a new country in 1 month. So we are in Germany, Spain, and Estonia right now. Initially, we were actually supposed to open 14 new countries in 2020, but we reshuffled our plans with 2020, COVID and pandemic. Yeah. But we are in 3 countries. There, basically, we have also localized the whole process.
And Karoli, my original perception of Jobbatical was that it was for relatively short-term placements, and I guess kind of the name is a play on sabbatical. I've got to say for myself, I don't intend leaving Estonia. The people I know who came here through Jobbatical, they want to stay here as well. Did you switch from kind of short-term to long-term? Did you get feedback from the users?
Yeah, that was basically very, very beginning of Jobbatical. I think when we talk about what the learnings that I have looking back, if you ask me what I would have done differently, I think one of the biggest learning is, and that's why I really recommend to listen to the podcast Masters of Scale. And then the first episode, Ray Hoffman, who's the founder of LinkedIn, is running this this podcast. And the first episode is with the Airbnb founder, who exactly told I should have listened to, I wish this podcast episode would have been aired already in 2014. But the first mistake that we did was that when we started to build Jobbatical, we started to build a product out of my idea. When you think about what we did now, and when we turned around the companies, that it was working on spreadsheets. The business model and everything was working in spreadsheets. So we just built tech around it to optimize and make it more efficient. But at the beginning of Jobbatical, Karoli had an idea and we started to build a business out of it, or like a platform out of it. So what I would recommend is you only build tech when the business in real life is working. So first, marketplace should have been a spreadsheet. Okay. Instead of building a product right away, right? So, which means that then you see what are the questions, what are the problems. So you actually make it work without building tech, and then build tech around it to optimize the whole process. And that's what Brian Shelsky is talking about in that first episode of Masters of Scale.
Interesting. Our producer is a fan of as well. It looks like.
Okay. So initially my idea was that in order to, as I said, that the vision was that highly skilled people, let's build a community and then kind of attract them to the far-flung cities. My thought was that in order for them to go to places like Tallinn and work, they probably don't want to commit long-term. So that was my thought. And so we initially made it like short-term gigs. What we found out was that the talent doesn't really care. I mean, either you like it and you stay, or you don't like it, you don't stay.
Yeah.
But for the companies, we actually created 2 hurdles. first new thing for them was the thought about hiring from abroad. Like, it's a big step. And now you're telling me that I have to hire that person for short term. So we kind of put two obstacles, and we figured it out in a few months. So we actually changed it quite fast. But again, this is something that you go and observe your users instead of think that this is my idea. So let's build, let's do it, right? So.
I was doing some research before the show, and a lot of companies did learn this the hard way. And I was actually blown away by how many recognizable, famous companies now were completely you wouldn't recognize their original business model. So, Karoli and listeners, I put together a quiz for you. So I'm going to read out the original mission of a company, and you've got to guess which well-known company it is today.
Very interesting.
So, question 1: which company was founded as a network where people can find and subscribe to podcasts?
Yeah, Twitter.
Okay.
I know
Correct.
that story.
All right. I was amazed. I didn't know this at all. So
we actually share that. So our investor in US was Twitter's early investor as well.
Okay. That's an easy point for you there. So Twitter started as audio podcast sites. They were worried when iTunes took over the podcast market, so they gave employees 2 weeks to come up with new ideas, and they turned themselves into a micro blogging platform. Of course, the rest is history. Question 2. An app game for checking into locations where, at those locations, you can use the app to earn points, make future plans with friends, and post pictures.
I wonder if it's one of the... So the Slack founder had a gaming company. He had two. He had two, actually. He did two. I don't know if that's one of them, no. Because he had very cool story, because he founded two gaming companies. One turned out to be Flickr, and the other turned out to be Slack. But I don't know if that's... But I don't recognize this one right now.
This one is Instagram. Instagram was originally a game, a location-based game.
I didn't know that story.
And they just obviously they stripped everything away apart from posting pictures. And actually, you're right. Like when I was doing research, it's very similar to Flickr as well. Like I guess a few kind of recognizable platforms started off as some kind of game or it was originally called Bourbon. Yeah. And let's see, question 3. What started as a fundraising platform for political and social causes, which only receive the funding once pledged donations reach a set target?
Oh, I have heard. What was that?
I can tell you.
Fundraising. Somehow I have in my brain somewhere that there was a story, but I can't remember it right now.
You may have found local deals.
Yes, it was the Estonian equivalent was Cherry. I was trying to figure out what was there. Groupon.
Groupon,
Groupon.
Groupon was originally the point, and the idea was very similar, except it was for political and social causes rather than business deals. So then Groupon started as like a small side project. They wanted to experiment with if it would work for local businesses, and that tiny side project completely eclipsed the rest of the business. Next question is, which company started off as a retailer of espresso machines and coffee beans? Probably quite a lot, but this one's quite well known.
No idea.
Starbucks.
Really?
So before, you could always get coffee in Starbucks, but originally it was as free samples. You used to have to go buy the machine, buy the beans, take it home and make it yourself. And it was Howard Schultz.
I didn't know that.
Went over to Italy and was inspired by the idea of actually let's create our own coffee houses instead. So a really interesting example of turning a product into a service. And some companies pivot the other way around, turn a service into a product, and of course it was a very successful pivot. Probably one of the only places Starbucks isn't successful is Italy. Really interesting example. This one, question 5, a little bit different. I'm just going to read out some of their original products, and you can guess which company they are, and I'll give you a clue. They're from near to us in the Nordic region. So which company started off making paper, then electricity, rubber, and then respirators, and now they're famous for something else?
I mean, I know that Nokia was doing rubber boots. Is that a Nokia?
The correct answer is Nokia.
Okay.
Okay. Before making mobile phones, Nokia was originally a paper mill, and actually they started making respirators in the 1930s.
This part I didn't know. Actually.
And they continued making respirators until the 1990s.
Really? That part I didn't actually. Rubber boots I did know that they were doing rubber, but.
of course, Nokia could have benefited from a few other pivots. Yeah, that was pretty tricky. There were also plenty of examples of businesses that didn't pivot, and those examples are just as important as a warning about what happens if you don't change. So one more bonus question is, do you know which company invented the first digital camera? And I'll give you a clue. It's not a company that has benefited very much from the digital camera industry.
Definitely no.
The answer is Kodak.
Actually, okay.
Kodak invented the first digital camera, then they hid away the plans. And
yes, so basically they still didn't, they were not adapting to change, right?
They were worried that if digital cameras take off, it's going to destroy the rest of their business, which was dependent on film processing. And they did go into bankruptcy, but that was but digital cameras still became like a massive industry. And okay, that was pretty difficult, although you did very well. Karoli, from a founder's perspective, how does it feel when you go through this kind of pivot? Is there a tinge of sadness if you're moving away from an original vision and have to make changes, or is it a very exciting process of renewing the company?
I think it's both, but it definitely you need time. I mean, for us, we made a very data-based decision. I think in that sense, it was much easier to pivot into something that we saw was working versus and to be honest, I don't even call it a pivot, I call it an evolution, because even our mission didn't change. Our mission is think beyond the borders and help the world to work together. And we're still doing that, but we're just doing a small piece of the long funnel that we were doing before, and we're very focused on that, right? So we made a data-based decision. So, but just giving, I remember when I did the presentation to our team, because, turning around the company, doing the evolution, pivoting, however we call it, it also meant letting go people. It meant letting go almost 500,000 users, something that we have been building for the past, 4 years. So it did. I even put the picture of a balloon flying away. So you just need to let go. But the letting go part is really, really hard, because you still want to think that the original idea works. And only later, one of the founders from our US investor portfolio, we had a chat from Canada, who's much later stage company CEO. He said that, the rule is that when you're not sure if you have a product market fit, then you probably don't have a product market fit, or then you don't have a product market fit. So basically, it is not maybe. If it's maybe, then you don't. You either have or you don't have. But letting go is very hard. But I think the companies, and this is something that I tell my team very often, especially now, again, during the COVID and lockdown and pandemic situation, emphasized that we have a strong change muscle. I think the companies who are good at change are the companies that actually survive. So I think this is a muscle as a founder and as a CEO, as a company overall, you have to train constantly. Yeah. So, and I think that's the story of Kodak. The change muscle didn't really was not really used there while the world was changing.
Is it always when? I'm just wondering kind of how much risk it's reasonable to take during a pivot. For you, it seemed like more of a logical next step. Would you pivot even when the business is going right and you think, you can take a risk to pivot to something that might work even better? Or is a pivot really, or an evolution, really a dramatic evolution really just required when you think this business isn't going to survive unless we change course? I
mean, if something is working out well and you have numbers going up and you see it's I think I'm a very big believer of focus, because I have made a lot of mistakes with not being focused enough in my life as a human as well as a business. So I think if you have something that is working really well, then you should be focusing on growing that. But probably with Kodak also, you start to see at one point that things are changing around you. So you have to be constantly able to adapt to change. So if something is not working, then you shouldn't be doing that, right? So I think it's not so black and white question, but to answer, but I think you should be good at change and you should be focused.
One thing I struggle with is I feel it kind of contradicts the idea of like entrepreneurs really have to have a strong vision and really push it through against like any obstacle, and kind of when no one think it's going to turn out, you might be the only person who think like you're on the right path. And at what point do you have to realize like this isn't working out? Like it must be, and what point, how do you know you just haven't pushed your original vision hard enough?
Yeah, that's a good question, but I think your clients will your clients will start to tell you that. So in that sense, if you have a vision but nobody's buying it from in the market, there's one thing. I mean, when I started Jobbatical, the first because we launched at the end of 2014, right? But I had the idea. I was pitching to angel investors. So the first angel round we actually did with just an presentation of my idea, right? So there, yes, you have to have a lot of resilience. You're running out of money. You're convincing people to join your journey, and then you have to get over the self-doubt of, yes, I can do it. This is good, and start testing it. But after that, it's the market who will actually give you feedback, because you have to be able to listen to your customers. If you have a good idea but nobody's buying it, then probably it's not a very good idea. There's no market for it, right? So you have to become a really good listener and adapt to what the market is actually telling you, right?
Yeah, and who else is part of that process of like... maybe I shouldn't say pivot anymore. I originally said this episode is going to be called kind of How to Pivot. We might have to change the name to Evolution, which I do prefer. How do you bring people with you, and and who is part of that process of like, you mentioned your kind of shareholders, you've got obviously your employees, and then you have like your customers and your users are kind of different people in this case. So you've got quite a few different stakeholder groups. Who's part of the process of like, where do you get the feedback from? Who do you consult before making the announcements?
Yeah, I think one definitely a big learning for me, and what I'm really, really happy about is that today I have a very strong management team around me. So when and somehow just before we turned around the company, we kind of got into this place where we had a product lead who taught me about building product and leading product. So we are the same with engineering. Operations, and so people around me suddenly were, and it wasn't just me going to them and saying that we need to do it. When I did the presentation to my management individually, we have had they had come to me saying that Karoli, there's something here, we need to act on it. So you need to have a strong team around you, and I'm very proud that I have a strong team around me. And with I think the way we are running Jobbatical is that we have a lot of transparency with our rest of the team, which means that when I presented this to the whole organization, which also resulted that like 1/3 of their organization was let go, I did it with all the data, all the reasoning. This is why we're doing it. This is what the data is telling us. This is why we can continue two businesses. And so basically, we just make it so crystal clear what's the reasoning behind the decision. And I think why we turned around the company so successfully was that when you let go 1/3 of the company, my biggest fear was that the morale of the company can go down, because you're losing so many colleagues that you love, right? But since we were so transparent about the reasoning and everybody got it, even though we let go some of the people, many of those people actually came to me and said they get it and wished us luck. And the other side, what we saw is that finally, since we also presented it with a very clear roadmap, this is now our product roadmap, this is where we are heading. Mission is the same. This is what those are the milestones. So suddenly we actually brought so much clarity about where we are heading, because what I learned is that we had been working on putting a lot of effort on something that wasn't working, and that's very tiring for your colleagues as well. And finally, the data was showing this thing is working and we can accelerate this. This is the value that we're creating, and people want to make a difference. Even though we have been always a very mission-driven company, you can have as much mission as possible. But when you see that, 20 people in a month are hired with all the work that we're doing, it's not very, it doesn't feel that you're making a difference. Whereas now we had a very clear purpose, very clear roadmap, a very clear value proposition, and it was working even without tech. So I think what I saw was that after that change, my team, the whole organization started to move faster than ever before because there was so much clarity.
A lot of companies, when they go through this kind of change, they change their name. Did you ever think of changing your name?
Yeah, we did think about it. We did discuss it. And actually, you were talking about stakeholders. We also have a board. And actually, it was the first, we decided with the management. Then I presented to the board. I was actually very nervous because we have investors there. We have invested all that money into building something, and we're giving up that part of the business. And just the same way as with the rest of the team, there was so much clarity. Our clients already loved what we're doing. One of the examples was when we sent out the change email to one of our immigration clients, which is a multinational company. They wrote back in caps lock that it's the best news ever. There was so much kind of that. I don't remember what was the question.
About changing the name of the company.
Name.
Yeah.
Okay, so we discussed it, and we discussed it with the board as well, and I think our board gave a very good advice. Everything has an opportunity cost. So if you are starting to rebrand yourself, it's a lot of attention, a lot of work, a lot of money that you're going to put on something that doesn't actually, is it Jobbatical or is it, we had, I don't remember, something around aliens. What was our number? Because usually foreigners are called in many languages in the legal aspect aliens. So we had something alien like name candidate. But and if you look at like Flipkart in India, for example, which is a huge, I don't know how many billion dollar company now, which was completely pivoted, but kept the same name, but nobody cares about the name. Or Airbnb, where are the air mattresses today? There are no air mattresses. So the name doesn't, so we might do it at one point, but we decided we will focus on building out the product, launching new countries, and I think that was a right decision.
It's interesting that you mentioned like your existing customers being happy, because I was wondering whether you were kind of pivoting towards different customers. Whether do different organizations come to you now? It's the same people.
It's the same people.
Just add more value.
Exactly. We had the funny story was actually with Verif, which. Was also our immigration, and he's our immigration client. And with them, I remember the quote, and I used that quote with a team presentation when we turned around the company as well as in the board, because it was such a perfect quote that thanks to Jobbatical immigration, they managed to grow their team 17 times last year. So we were a recruiting business, but we were not doing recruiting for them. But thanks to our immigration, they were able to recruit faster.
Really
so it was like a very interesting feedback that this part of our business was actually creating value to the original part of what we thought we should be doing.
And at first, the migration part of it was like just additional hassle.
It was like additional hassle, yes.
That's really interesting, because I guess, there's so many different ways you can evolve or pivot. And, you can, I guess the classic one is kind of turning a product into a service or a service into a product. For startups, it's, between are you a platform or are you an application on someone else's platform? But sometimes, it's about, making your business leaner, focusing on something you're already doing. I guess, Instagram's a very good example as well. Like they were always letting their users take pictures and post pictures. They had to take a step back to see like that is where the value came from. Really interesting. I guess most of the time pivoting is about kind of stripping away and being more focused. Do many businesses ever think about expanding when they evolve, or as a startup, or is that kind of like?
I mean, you should start expanding when something is working. Then that's the growth phase, right? You have a model that is working, and now you are expanding this, but you shouldn't be expanding something that is not working. So, and maybe that's something that we did or we tried to do with the old Jobbatical. We call it old Jobbatical. That. started to hire too fast too many people, even though it wasn't working. Like the conversion, I mean, we got people hired, we relocated from all those countries to all those countries, but the conversion was very low. The model was not working, but we already went into kind of like a growth mode, right? So you should expand if it's working, but you should not expand when it's not working. So you first have to find that product market fit, right?
And how do you manage the communications around this? Because obviously you've got different stakeholders that are part of the process, and then you have to kind of make that public announcement. And I guess it's partly a celebration of a new direction, but then there's also kind of the job losses and that. So what's your communication strategy?
I mean, you just, this is a strategy. I mean, yeah, different stakeholders, different ways of communicating. But I think for us and for me, you just have to be very transparent and tell the story. I mean, we told the story of the evolution very clearly to all our stakeholders. We told our users, talent users, that even though people loved our platform, what we discovered is that they can be, so basically, in order to fulfill their dreams, this is what we need to focus. That's when we are going to give much bigger impact to global mobility versus doing the recruiting part. We also had, you have to go back to your clients. What we try to do is that, some of the clients had already prepaid for recruiting campaigns in the future. We had to go back and see what we can do to, so that the clients would be happy, right? To find a solution where we can give back at least partially what they had. So which meant that, we were losing even more money, but at the same time to have like good feeling about collaboration with us. So there was a lot of difficult discussions. But
you had some unhappy clients during that process?
I mean, we tried to make the unhappy clients happy. So I think at the end, we managed to get everyone happy or happy-ish. So we really tried to have a good integrity there. In terms of people, we were very transparent, as I told before. So we didn't need anybody with recruiting talent. We didn't need anybody talent facing anymore, because we were completely B2B now, completely different business model. So we just were very transparent about why and what was behind the decision.
And you talked about your team's change muscle. So how did your team how have you and your team personally developed over the last 6 years of building this company? How do you foster that kind of team spirit? And
yeah, I mean, there has been a lot of learning for me and the team. Of course, a lot of changes in the team as well. We had 2 people who actually had been with us, besides my co-founder, for 5 years, which is a big thing, right? So they had really seen the changes. But I have had a lot of learnings as a leader. We have had times where the morale was really low, and it turned out the morale was low because of how I was working. So I had to really take a step back, tell my team that now I need to learn together with you to become a better leader. And they helped me to become one. So we have I think what I can be really proud of today is that the culture or the way we communicate, the team members can come to me, give me honest feedback. I can go to them, give honest feedback. We are trying to treat our employees as, in a way, shareholders, as transparent as possible, that they know the financial status, they know our concerns, they know our hassles. So today, I think if I compare the Jobbatical that we had, I think it was 2017, when I had this moment of realization that it was me where the team morale was low, and I had to take a step back, and I actually went to communication trainings in New York. I was very transparent about the mistakes that I realized I was doing. Versus today, I'm really proud of the culture and the atmosphere we have today in the team. And a lot of it is the transparency, which means that as a leader, you have to be able to admit your mistakes. You have to say that this is what I did wrong. I see that this is the impact of me doing wrong, and this is how I'm planning to learn, and you can help me to become a better leader.
Well, I've been to your office before and I've always got a very warm welcome. It's a very nice, I guess, just because it is such like a diverse team and like, yeah, really great office you have here. Karoli, there's like really interesting trends at the moment in international recruitment. And like, I guess the big buzzword is about remote working because obviously during the pandemic, so many more people are doing it. How does that kind of fit into your plans? Because I guess you're helping people move, but then you are helping companies that want to move people together into one location.
That's one part of it. First of all, what we're seeing, and to be honest, what I believe is that companies still will be relocating people. So we are still living in the. So if you look at the statistics, like there's never before have countries experienced talent shortage as they are experiencing now, and it will become much more acute by 2030. So basically, everybody's fighting for the same talent, and so that's one part of it. But there's one other part that often I'm very often, especially now, asked the same question: Are we now losing business because people will not be relocated anymore? There's another aspect, which is basically that now more and more companies are struggling with the fact that yes, they would gladly allow people to work remotely from wherever in the world, but there's no legal. There's no policy to support that. So basically, if let's say Facebook now knows that or Google said, I think Google said that they will not open their offices until the next summer, right? So suddenly all Google employees, or let's say 5,000 of them, decide to go and work from Europe, which is a great dream. They can do it. Everybody knows that there's remote work is working. But now imagine if Google has 5,000 illegal people working illegally in Europe, because today you either are hired in a local company in that local market, or you go there as a tourist, and as a tourist you shouldn't be working. You are illegal if you're working. It's not you shouldn't, you're actually illegal then. So so what we are seeing more and more companies asking us is to handle the immigration of their remote employees who are moving between different countries. And that's one of the reasons why the timing of the digital nomad visa, which we started 2 years ago, right now the timing is perfect for that to actually come into effect, because my prediction is that there will be like an explosion of digital nomads after this pandemic.
So Karoli, maybe we need to start at the beginning here about the digital nomad visa, because our country has to pivot or evolve too. So Estonia has introduced a digital nomad visa. You were a huge part of that. Like, what was the process of introducing it, and what is it for people who don't know?
So basically, the story started. I mean, we were doing Jobbatical, and we, at that time we were still recruiting Jobbatical. And what we saw is that we have a lot of basically the same thing that I was briefly mentioning before. That we had people who moved to a specific country to work there. In the local company, or we had people who were digital nomads and working remotely for companies. And what we realized is that when that person is working remotely for a company, they're working illegally. That there's a policy hole. And I think it was President Kaljulaid at the end of 2016 in December. We had like a small group meeting with some of the founders, with the president. And that was the first time I actually pitched why Estonia should do. So it was 2016. But then it was just, I was talking to different people about this idea. But it was 2018. I think you were at the meeting as well. Were you at the meeting? Or Arno was.
Arno, yes. Yep.
Arno from e-residency.
And
so
Alex.
we organized...
Both of whom came to Estonia through Jobbatical, yeah.
So we had this meeting. We organized a meeting with the ministries of... So there was Interior Ministry, Economic Ministry, so different counterparts from the public office, as well as we included some of the digital nomad communities globally, and we did a survey that basically showed, we made a case why the country would need to create a digital nomad visa, how that will help the country, and then also why it is a pain for digital nomads. And basically from the survey we saw that the number one problem for digital nomads, either they are employed by a company or they are freelancers, was the visa situation. And they also said that a country that would solve that visa situation would be attractive to them, right? So we wanted to create a visa that would fill that hole, that you can have, your employer can be Facebook in, Silicon Valley, but you can legally work in a country remotely. So for a year. So that's basically the solution. I would have even made it maybe a little bit longer, but that's basically the solution we found. So for a year, you can work legally as a digital nomad, either as a freelancer or an employee of a corporation in another country. And it's important because, like I said, a lot of companies are struggling with it because they would gladly allow their employees, and we could have, through our platform, we could do all the immigration miracles. But we can't do the immigration miracles if the policy doesn't exist. So that's why we are encouraging, and what we hope is that other countries will follow the lead of Estonia.
So pretty much all countries at the moment have a system in which people kind of openly lie when they enter. They have to say they're a tourist
and then they're illegal. And then, a freelancer, you can do it. You can take the risk, hop in and hop out.
Because where is the line between kind of answering an email on your phone or kind of actually working?
But like I said, if you are working for a business, and suddenly the business has illegal employees all across the world, that will become a big legal issue as well as PR issue, right? So...
Karoli, I always see the same fear about remote work, especially kind of in recent months with the pandemic, and people have been talking a lot more about, we can work anywhere remotely. And then the next fear that comes in is kind of like, it's going to be outsourcing to people who are going to do the jobs cheaper than us, and we're going to lose our jobs. And but then when I look at Jobbatical and people aren't using Jobbatical to find cheaper talent. They're trying to find the best talent,
exactly.
And they're paying the global market rate. So I guess kind of what we're really seeing is kind of an equalization of like a global market in how much you pay for certain skills and talent.
Exactly. It's funny. I hadn't actually heard that very much.
I think as people can probably tell from my accent, I spend a lot of time listening to public opinion in the UK. And in the UK, I see this a lot, kind of this debate about, remote working. How is it going to affect our jobs? And at first people think, it's great. We can go and live in a hot country and be next to the beach. And then when they think about it a bit more and they think like, but it means, someone else is going to take my job. So I've kind of seen that a bit recently.
But I even remember actually Kaspar, who used to be the CEO of e-residency. So remember because when he started to hire for e-residency through Jobbatical, one of the things he said was that suddenly I had the whole world as a competition. So he's, you see like somebody like Arnaud coming from the French president's cabinet, or somebody from Walt Disney, applying. So you suddenly don't compete this small group. You don't see your pipeline of talent being a small group of who are accidentally around you. And that was the old case, right? Accidentally somebody's born lives in the next street, and accidentally is that person the rightest person to hire. Whereas if you can now basically the whole world can be your talent pipeline, there's much higher probability you will find the right person, right? And that's so I would look at the other way around. Yeah.
And I'm totally biased because you're talking about my former colleagues at e-residency and now my friends, and but I do think they've made a huge contribution to our country, and allowed us to do more things here. So Karoli, you've started 3 businesses in Estonia then. Kind of for people listening around the world, what's the advantage of starting up in Estonia? Yeah,
so I have also seen the evolution of starting up in Estonia, because when I was 16, it was very different than it is today. I mean, I started Jobbatical from a cafe. It took me 10 minutes. I was sitting, I was sitting in Wi-Fi, eating an omelette, and back then, drinking cappuccino. And it took me 10 minutes to start up a company. And like I said, I think the biggest advantage is that, like, one of the things that we have helped to make is that it is easy. It is easy to relocate people from whichever country, which means that you can actually hire the best people, and relocation is not an issue. The fact that bureaucracy is almost non-existent. I think it's a very simple country to navigate. So you don't, like I said, you don't have to worry about being an entrepreneur and the bureaucratic overhead around that. You can just focus on your business. So I think Estonia has a great user experience, and you can just put your time in the right place and focus instead of wasting it on nonsense and bureaucracy. I think that for me is a very big advantage.
That's wonderful. Karoli, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. We often think of change as risky, but sometimes not changing is the riskiest thing you can do. And we've learned that pivoting comes in many different forms, but you're not starting from scratch. Sometimes it's as simple as looking inside your own business and reevaluating what your customers want and where your users get the most value. And, sometimes that can be hard to spot, but you've got to take a step back. And we've learned that you have to take your stakeholders with you, investors, your team, your customers, and your users, who might not always be the same people, and also make difficult decisions about what not to do. And that might mean letting people go sometimes. Karoli, it's been wonderful having you here. Is there any last advice you'd give to entrepreneurs if they're considering kind of big changes in their business?
Considering, I think you said it really. I think it's good to keep on training the change muscle, because I think as we learned this spring, nothing is under we don't control anything, so we have to have a good habit of adapting to change. So keep on changing that. And in general, what I've said to other entrepreneurs is I think what has helped me is to thinking of building a vision is something like rock climbing. The main thing is just like keep on climbing and don't look down. Otherwise you get dizzy and you fall. So just, focus on the right things and keep on climbing. Mm-hmm.
And Karoli, thank you so much for helping Estonia change. It's Estonia kind of likes to think of itself as like a startup as well. So you've inspired others, but you've also had a direct involvement in kind of changing the way Estonia works. So thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting.
Thank you. So you've been listening to the Startup in Estonia podcast produced by Startup Estonia. In the next episode, we'll be covering another very useful part of creating a startup with another very interesting startup founder to be announced who can provide some expert guidance on that subject. So use the hashtag Startup in Estonia if you want to talk about this episode or if you just want to tell more people about the show. And thank you so much for listening.